Okay, so for today's lesson or task, what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a LAMP server. A LAMP server is an acronym for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And what we're going to create it on is a very small, lightweight Linux distribution called Alpine Linux. It gets used in the Docker community quite a bit because it's very, very small, very, very lightweight. And I'll give an example of how small in just a second. But this Linux distribution is quite good, somewhat new for me. Just sort of recently came across it, but been playing around with it for the past few days, and I think it makes a really good lightweight test environment if you just need to test things or set up a quick demo system. And the reason being is, again, it's just so lightweight. I'm not sure I'd use it in production because to keep it small, it does omit quite a few technologies. Like it doesn't come with any sort of firewall or something out of the box. But it's as on the website says, it is security oriented, so it's really as secure as you'd want it to be. But let's first log in to this. I already have it installed on a virtual machine. So we're going to connect to that using SSH. So SSH Joe. This is the IP address of the virtual machine. And we accept the security key. First time logging in from this system. We put in the password. And here we are. So when I talk about Alpine being small, what do I mean? Well, I can tell you that on this virtual machine, we can look here using this command top. We can see here, actually it's only using about 70 megabytes to run the operating system right now. Of course, this is a fresh install, but still very impressive. It only has a total of 512 megabytes to use, so it means like if you're testing this or if you're running a virtual machine, say like on a Windows laptop or a Linux laptop or Mac OS or whatever, it wouldn't take up a lot of your system resources and you can get quite a bit done. The other nice thing, again, because it's small, so exit that. If we go to the main directory of Linux, so this is beyond home, this is really like the, not even the root directory, it's just, the main directory. And we, first let's run as root, so we'll switch over to the root user, type the password. We're going to run this command. This tells you how much disk usage is being used in that file directory. So if we go to the main directory, it should give us an idea of roughly how much total disk usage is being used by the operating system. We can see here, first it came up very quick because there's not a lot of directories. And here you can see it's actually using only 720 megabytes of storage space for the entire operating system. So it makes it very good to run out of memory. A lot of people do. It also makes it just highly performant for this type of simple testing. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to use this to create a LAMP stack. Now, I just sort of briefly talked about LAMP stack, but we can look up here. You can type in here in the software bundle in the Wikipedia, gives you a pretty good idea. So Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Perl, Python, all that good stuff. So it's essentially it's a whole bundle of software that you need to develop and also host things like possibly this Wikipedia or other websites like Facebook. Pretty much every website is going to have some of these components based on top of it, either in a single machine or running in distributed systems. Like you could have Apache or your web server. This could also have been, Nginx. So it wouldn't have been LAMP. It would have been like LIMP. But you could have a web server of some kind running on one machine or many machines, and they're all asking a database server, which could be a dedicated database server. PHP, Perl, Python typically be running with the web server, though they don't have to. But what we're going to do, just for simplicity's sake, and also because this will go into future tutorials where we talk a little bit more about web design and PHP and dealing with databases and so on. We're going to sort of build upon this, so I wanted to get this out there so we have a building block. And the other thing I might do is, this is setting up an actual web server, so going through all the steps. And there are quite a few. So hopefully this isn't going to take too long, but I'll also try to do another video where we're doing sort of a similar thing, but we're using Docker and Docker Compose. And I have a template, and I'm going to play around with that a little bit and probably put that in a separate video. So first thing to do, what we're going to do is we're going to update the system. Now in Alpine, what they use for their package management is a package management tool called APK. So we're going to do APK update. And again, we're running all this as root. Alpine, unlike a whole bunch of other distributions, for example, Fedora or Ubuntu, doesn't have sudo, so it doesn't allow users to run as root privileges, which means that you have to sort of install things as the root user rather than running packages and calling for root privileges only when you need them. I do believe it's possible to install this package manager, but first thing what we're going to do is we're going to do an APK search for Apache. So we got a lot of things over here. And I'm going to go through my notes and sort of read through which ones that I use. So Apache 2, I'm just going to say APK add Apache 2. This is going to install the Apache server, and it also gives you a running tally in Alpine of how much disk space is being used. Now we're going to install the database packages, so APK add MariaDB. We're going to use MariaDB is the open source version of MySQL, and we also want MariaDB client. So this is going to install both those packages. I'm also going to sort of briefly look through the notes just to make sure that I have all this covered. There's one thing in my notes which I don't think I mentioned, but we're going to get to that in just a sec. So with Alpine, in Ubuntu, when we started a service, and we saw this on the Samba when we did an Samba start or Samba enable, by doing service Samba enable or service SMBD enable in Ubuntu, what that does is the service is then set to run at startup. In Alpine, they use what's called RC service, and I'm just gonna check the usage of that. We can still use service start to get things running, which is the way I did it in my notes. But I'm just gonna look very quickly at the wiki. One of the nice things about Alpine is it has a lot of good wikis, and I'm going to include some additional information about these as we go through, and also in the blog as a reference. So let me just go back here. We'll see where we are. Okay, so that installed. Now I'm going to do APK search PHP. Yeah, and it's not seeing a lot of the PHPs. And the reason for this is that the default repositories for Alpine don't include PHP. I think we need to enable the community one. So what we do in Alpine is we go to this directory called etc apk, and then here we have a list of the repositories. Let me actually add one more thing. It's my favorite text editor, so that's not going to trip me up. Okay, so now that we're in here, you can see a lot of these are commented out. These are other places where we can get more information from Alpine, so we're just going to enable this. So everything but the testing. Exit. Yes. Then we're going to update the APK package manager again, so it gets more packages from other sources as well, not just the main one. Now we're going to do apk search PHP. Okay, now we have a lot more PHPs. So what we're going to do is add these additional repositories and see, have this in the notes too. And I'll try to include the notes in the blog as well, in case it's easier to follow along. But we just do apk add PHP 7. This is going to pull in a whole bunch of stuff. But we also want to make sure that it gets PHP 7 MySQLi. The MySQLi is going to be sort of a connector, and is how you access database files. We'll sort of see that run in just a minute. So I think we got these major ones. Okay, so that added quite a bit, and you can see sort of where we're going. We're getting close to 1 GB of total storage space. That's okay. You know, it's still extremely lightweight. So now we get into the fun stuff of trying to configure all of this. So first thing we're going to do is going to go rc service, and it should be Apache 2 enable. Let's check the usage. We'll do rc service start. Okay, starting Apache 2. Now we're get the IP of this. So 192.168.123.172. Assuming everything went correctly, it works. That's good. Now we're going to make sure that the PHP is running. So we're going to go to the web server, and the default location for the web server in Alpine is under this directory. The only reason I remember it correctly is because I just did this on a separate system for practice. But once you come in here, you'll see the index HTML, and this exactly is the web page that we're seeing right here. So if we look at it by using the cat command, you see HTML body header 1, it works, which is exactly what we're seeing. So it's a very simple HTML page that Apache puts in when you first install it to show you, okay, yeah, it's working. What we're going to do is we're going to create another simple PHP script. And all this is going to do is show us the PHP info running a PHP command. And we have the file. So what we want to do is we go here. There. Okay, good. So we see the PHP version come up. Again, we didn't include all of this text. This is essentially showing that PHP is active and working on our system, which is good. The other thing that we did, let me just check to make sure I have most of this set up correctly. Okay, yeah, there's a few more steps. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to enable MariaDB. And once we do the MariaDB enable, so rc service MariaDB start. And check, okay, I think what we want to do is do the first MariaDB setup. Okay, so that was a mistake on. Okay, creating a new MySQL, so setting everything up. Okay. And then we then do the RC service MariaDB. Now we're started. Now the first thing that we got to do is we need to run a command. And what this is going to do is it's going to change our root password. It's going to let us set the root password for the MySQL server, which is the same SQL server that MariaDB is running, because MariaDB again is sort of the open source version of MySQL. So we type this MySQL secure installation. Helps if I type it correctly. Enter the password for root. Okay, so we'll give it a password. Switch to Unix socket authentication. No, I don't want that for now. Change root password. Yes, let's change it again. New password. Remove anonymous users. Yes. Allow remote login for our purposes, because the PHP servers and the MySQL will be running on the same local host. So we don't need to allow for remote login. If you were running the DB on like its own isolated virtual machine or something where you were running it separately, then you probably would now. You may want to allow a remote root login. But for this case, no, we don't need that. Remove test database, yes. Reload privilege tables now, yes. Thank you for using MariaDB. Okay, so that has us set up. And we can also go and check just to make sure that the root user and password and everything is set correctly. Okay, so here we are. This is inside MariaDB. We're inside the database at this time, so everything that we do from here is going to be in the database. And since we're here, what I want to do is set up a user. I want to set up a user for PHP MyAdmin. PHP MyAdmin is going to be the vehicle or the tool that we use to help interact with the database, to create new tables, to create new databases, and is very important for a lot of PHP developers and web developers as a simple and graphical way to interact with the database. Otherwise, you have to set up everything with command line to begin with, which is perfectly fine, but not always as obvious when you're trying to go through and debug and set up new issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, I just typed something over here. So this is the steps for creating a new user. Create user, and call this PA user at some location. It could be localhost. We're going to say this %, which, as I understand it, should be a radical, essentially for any, and identified by, and this is where we have a password. So we just enter in the password for this user. This is a MySQL user password. It's not. It has something really to do with Linux. So we could call it MariaDB. We could just say anything. So maybe we're calling it PMA Maria or something. And obviously this system is not going to be exposed or running normally, so I don't really worry about you guys knowing the password. So enter that. Okay. Grant all privileges. On. And then this sign. This again is part of a command that I found on another page. I'm not a SQL expert by any means, but I believe that dot is essentially referring to like the root database or tables, so it's giving us permission for all the tables. And then to PMA user, and again at % with grant option. And in SQL, these semicolons at the end and the capitalization, all of this is very case sensitive, so you do have to make sure you get it all right. Most things that are command oriented in MySQL do require capitalization, so make sure you get that right. So grant all privileges on to PM user. Yes. Okay, that's fine. And now we flush the privileges. This essentially is going to clear out any privileges that might be cached in the system now that it's already running. So we're flushing that to make it sort of reset itself. Okay, that's good. And that should be everything that we need from there. Now the next thing to do, first we exit by clear. What we're going to do now is we're going to set up PHP MyAdmin. PHP MyAdmin in Ubuntu is actually a lot easier to set up than it is in Alpine, and this got me stumped for a little while. But reading through the wiki page on Alpine, it talks a little bit about how everything works. So essentially, where the default where PHP MyAdmin gets installed to is in this user share web apps. Let's see the PHP MyAdmin. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the cmod for this. We're going to give it more readable access to the web servers. So we're going to make this cmod R777. This is full permissions in Unix. 7 essentially is read, write, execute. 5 would be read and execute. And then, 2, 3, 4, I forget which is which, but what I mean by all of this is, you can see here, if you type ls-all-al, we have these prefixes at the beginning. So essentially this is the owner, so it's a directory, and then the owner has read, write, execute, RWX. The people within the same group have read, no write, but execute, so this would be 755. And then the guest, or if there was someone without sort of like login privileges, would be able to read and execute from these folders. But what we want to do for PHP MyAdmin here is we're going to grant it all. So cmod R777 PHP MyAdmin. I'm not exactly sure if it's really necessary to give it such high level access, but that's what we're going to do because this is what worked for me before. And then we're also going to run in a different spot, cmod 755 on this etc php myadmin config.inc.php. Okay, and the reason we did that is because inside here, if we go in PHP MyAdmin, in this web app, this essentially is the whole software. This is where all the source files and the pages and everything that makes PHP MyAdmin work is all located in this directory. So we wanted to make sure that this directory was then accessible and readable by the Apache web server. Then we went to this etc PHP MyAdmin. We took this config file, and again, we can do lsal so you can see the permission we gave. So this is the 755 where it's a file, so it's not a directory, so no D. Then you have read, write, execute for the owner. Read, no write and execute, and read, no write and execute. This is essentially is going to allow the Apache web service to then read this config file. This is the default config file. We don't need to change it. We just need to make sure that that's readable by the Apache server. And then we're going to go back to the root level for or the default reading space for the Apache server. We're going to create a directory, and we're going to create a symbolic link right here. So this ln-s means symbolic link. Essentially what this does is it creates a link from the root of this web application that we just saw under this user share web apps PHP MyAdmin. Just highlight that, Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V, clean up that extra slash. To right here, I'll put up the whole. Okay, and this is this line that we did here. So we create the symbolic link so that this directory has a link to it inside where Apache reads the information, and then it's going to read to this new symbolic link, and this symbolic link is going to essentially appear like a pseudo directory inside of the Apache main. So Apache's going to think, oh, I'm reading just from myself, but actually what I'm doing is I'm just getting linked over inside of the Alpine host to where I need to be. So once we do that, like ls, okay, so we have that, and now we let's just restart, being extra careful here. I'm going to restart the Apache 2 service, stopping Apache 2, restarting Apache 2, because we did install we did set up the MariaDB later, and now we've included the PHP MyAdmin. So what we're going to try to do is, we were here with this PHP info. We're going to change this over to PHP MyAdmin. Okay, so that come up. That's good. Now we're going to try to log in with the PMA user and give it the password we just assigned. Make sure I type it right. And there we are. Cool. So essentially those are all the steps in Alpine to bring us from 0 to a working, usable LAMP stack. Once we're in here, you can use this to create database. So you could say test2 create. We now have a database test2. From here, we can create a table, and maybe this is like pizza orders or something, and we can put in columns. Go. And then from here, we can then add names for columns. We can assign them different attributes, and we essentially can interact with the database. And you can see immediately how much easier it is being able to interact with something visual, which kind of guides you a little bit more, rather than trying to interact and memorize all the SQL commands and DB commands. But once this is set up, and in following subsequent tutorials, we're going to use this tool and also do a little bit of HTML, CSS, and more PHP work, just because it's stuff that I've been doing recently. And I think it's also very helpful because once you can create a user interface by yourself, and once you can work with these tools and you're able to save things into a database, there's just a ton of opportunity and a ton of things that you can go and create, because again, the web applications can be pervasive. They can be almost anywhere. So those are the steps. Again, I'll put more information in some of these references that I used to build this guide. I'll put them in the blog, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much.